Hey guys, it's Jessica.
And this is Kendra, and you're listening to
Lucid Lab.
As you're listening to this today, I am going to be up in a plane headed to South America right now, so wish me luck.
Especially with all the plane stuff recently.
I know, like the thing with Brazil.
Yeah, there's so much going on with planes.
I double checked after the Brazil plane incident because that was just horrifying. Like, that's your worst nightmare. Going to fly some small regional airlines within Peru, and I went to make sure that we were not on propeller planes.
Okay.
And we're not.
Okay.
So slightly better, but still scary always.
Well, it's funny that I say that because at some point I'll be going on a plane. I think when I told you about the California trip, it's a little ways out. Well, guys, it's like 5 months out. So I've been still trying to plan things as much as I can because that's just who I am.
Just to know you have it done.
Right. And know how much money
and
you
budget.
should expect. I have Queen Mary booked.
Yeah.
Because that is one of the ones where you do have to go ahead of time.
Yeah, that thing will book out months in advance, I'm sure.
Anaheim, I can't do yet. I tried. I actually talked to someone and they said that mid-October, December is going to be when the pricing for that time makes sense. Otherwise, you actually are either going to pay more or it won't even be available to reserve yet. So there's that. And then the third part of my trip is San Diego. And I haven't really thought about San Diego because that's just family time. But I started looking into San Diego and I realized, well, my aunts, they all live kind of inland. And I was like, damn it.
I want to be at the beach.
I want to be at the beach. And it's kind of funny to bring it up is because we're replacing an intro from the past. Right.
Yes.
In this episode, because this is a rerun. In the past, in the very beginning, you and I used to talk about CoStar all the time. And I looked today and it said beach, used bookstores, and naps. And I was like, that's the dream.
You're like, this is what I want to do all day.
And it was very fitting because last night I booked something I never thought I would get to do ever.
Okay.
In San Diego, I booked a beach house and I'm only 100 feet from the beach.
That's amazing. So you can just run out.
Yeah. We're just going to be able to wake up and go eat breakfast on the beach. And so now I'm kind of more excited about that portion. And it was more about family before, not really about doing specific things. But now knowing we're going to be in a beach house is amazing. And I really did not think that that was a possibility. I mean, that should be a ridiculous amount of money, but it actually was not.
Probably because it's February.
The house right next to it is $2,000 more for the same amount of time. I don't know why.
Just meant to be.
I'm also going against everything that I said in other episodes. I'd never do a Airbnb or a Verbo or anything like that. And I didn't specifically go and look for that. It popped up on one of the booking sites. And I was like, oh.
Okay.
Well, then that's a dream. And it was affordable.
Awesome.
It was either that or I'm at a crappy Days Inn or something
for
in the
probably
middle
the same
of
price.
El Cajon.
Yeah.
And it wasn't much different. So I was like, okay, that's what we're doing. And so I'm really excited.
Well, you should be. That's exciting. Your daughter's going to have so much fun. Kids love the beach. Even if the water's cold, she'll still love it.
Yeah, I'm just there to sit on the beach. That's what I want to see. That's what I want to do.
I, am the same way when it comes to the beach. I just love the sound of the ocean. Like when you're sleeping or when you're just hanging out, drinking a glass of wine on the port, there's something just calming. And then also just the whole grounding of touching your feet to the sand.
Yeah.
There's a lot to it. For me, I think I've shared on here several times. I'm not a good swimmer, number one, and I'm kind of afraid of the ocean. So.
No, me too. I do want to get over that at some point, but that's going to take a lot.
You have to go there a lot to get over it.
Right, exactly. So I'm sad actually now that that's kind of the last part of our trip and we'll be there the least amount of time compared to everything else. But
Disney is a big deal for your daughter.
It is. It's a very big deal for her. So this trip is for her. It's for my mom. Then at some point, I just need to find my way back because I do remember when I did kind of a road trip type vacation in California before, when I sat on the beach one day, I remember sitting there and being like, God, I have to live on a beach at some point. This has to happen in my life because I just feel so connected to the water, even though I'm scared of her.
Same. And watching sunsets over the water is amazing. But I also feel the same way when I'm in the mountains. Sitting in Telluride is one place I can think of that I went to years ago. There's just something calming about the mountains as well because it's so quiet.
I think I do get that, but I've never felt more connected than sitting on a beach. That's just me.
A lot of people feel that way. They say you have to pick, are you more of a beach girl or are you more of a mountain girl? And I look at both and I'm like, I want both
I
in
want
my
both.
life. Yeah, that's me. I need it all.
And I'm the Bella of this whole show, right?
You don't even like sun.
I don't. Well, the sun doesn't like me. It's different for me, you know?
You can go to the beach in Northern California, Washington, and Oregon, and there's no sun.
Right.
So,
I guess I do need to go move to those areas, and then it'll be so cold I won't even get in. I won't
and
even
then you don't have to
attempt
learn how to
I know.
live in the ocean.
People still surf and stuff up there, though.
Yeah, those are real dedicated people.
Yeah. Anyway,
So.
I'm just really excited. And the beach.
That's
and my
awesome.
daughter has only been to the beach once, and she was like 2 or 3.
So it's not in her memory at this point.
She remembers like a snippet, or she at least knows that she went there, so she brings it up a lot. It'll be fun.
Yeah. We talked about this on the last episode. We are starting our rerun series. It's only 2 episodes. And the first one that we chose is the Stanley Hotel.
Yep.
This was the second episode that we recorded ever.
It's crazy.
It was my first time running an episode and also editing.
Right.
So I had to really stop myself from going back and wanting to re-edit everything. I'm very judgmental now that we've been doing it for over a year.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to listen to ourselves in the beginning when we were trying to, get our legs underneath us.
Well, also finding our own personality within this, because I am also looking at what will be our second rerun, and I'm like, wow, you're cringy.
I felt the same way. So please listen with grace
Yeah.
to this. Know that we realize that we've evolved just in a year.
Majorly.
And the other thing that we did on Stanley Hotel is we didn't understand exactly how long an episode should be. We were still learning. And so we split it into 2 when it really didn't need to be split into 2. It was only a 2-hour episode when I cut out we had like a really long intro on it as well.
Yeah.
We did way too long of intros in the beginning. We made our mistakes. And hopefully you guys appreciate that who have been on the journey with us from the beginning. But we wanted to put this one out there again as just one solid episode, especially for those of you who have not been with us from the get-go and you haven't heard the Stanley Hotel yet, because it's an iconic haunted place that is literally 45 minutes from where Jessica and I live.
Yep.
Jessica and I have not been up there together like we said we were going to do in the episode. So now I'm bringing that back, that we need to do that.
I have always wanted to do their ball. They do like some ball at Halloween.
Don't they also do one at New Year's? Maybe we could make a New Year's one happen.
New Year's one, yes, they do.
The episode is really good information. It's got all the history, which was really interesting to me. And then all of the great haunting stories are in there as well. I hope you guys enjoy it.
It's a classic. Go ahead and listen and come back next week for another rerun. But please, guys, if you haven't listened in a while, go back to some oldies.
Yes, take advantage of the next 2 weeks. We have so many episodes out there that we think you'll enjoy.
Yes.
So on this episode, I was so excited to research this place. It's near and dear to my heart. I've been here. I think if you go looking for a list of the most haunted places in America, for sure, perhaps even in the world, it's guaranteed this spot is going to show up.
It's going to pop up.
Yeah. And that place is the Stanley Hotel.
I'm so excited.
Yay. And we're Colorado girls. I felt like it was only fitting that this is the first paranormal podcast that we do is on the Stanley Hotel. And I've been there 2 times.
And I've been once. I need to go back.
We want to go back. And after I tell you some of these stories, we're definitely going to have to book another.
I mean, it's really ridiculous that we've only been that little amount of times.
Right.
It's just as close as us driving to the south of Denver.
So if you're not familiar with the Stanley Hotel, what it's probably most known for is its connection to Stephen King's The Shining.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to talk more about that later. And then also it is located in Estes Park. So this is a little village, not village, it's a tourist city where Rocky Mountain National Park is right there. If you don't hear about the connection to The Shining, you've probably heard about all of the hauntings that have happened there, perhaps. Mm-hmm. And it's quite active. There's been quite a few ghost paranormal shows, podcasts, YouTubers that have gone there to do paranormal investigations.
Oh, there's a lot on it.
I went on the ghost tour there. So
I didn't get to do that.
And we'll talk more about that. Sorry, I don't want to spoil anything. So I'm going to jump in. Did you want to say anything about your experience there?
So when we ate at the Stanley and their restaurant,
it was really good.
It's a really beautiful restaurant.
It is.
The entire property is beautiful.
You just feel like you're stepping back in time.
I had a great time, but I do have one quirk that really pissed me off when I was sitting there. Because when we got the charcuterie, is that what it's
Charcuterie?
Charcuterie. I should know this. I worked at plenty of places where I had to say the freaking word, but whatever.
It's the hardest word maybe not the hardest, but it's up there with Worcestershire.
Worcestershire. Some lady I watch, it's like a cooking show, and she calls it like wash your sister, just to make it funny because she's tired of trying to say the word. I was like, maybe don't wash your sister. But actually, it wasn't even that. I think it was a cheese board. That's what I got. Okay. Anyway, it comes with like tiniest little pieces of bread, steamy things. And I was like, please, can I have some more? And so I asked the server, and he was like, oh, yeah, sure. And I was like, thanks. And he's like, it's $1 a piece. And I was like, $1 a fucking piece of a tiny little piece
bread
of
costs $1
bread?
a loaf, dude.
Because I mean, all that cheese, I need to eat it with something. So I was pretty sour about that. Yeah, I'm like, I can go buy 2 loaves with how much bread I want.
You're definitely paying for the ambience there if you eat at the restaurant, but
I'm sorry, they could have given me even just one, and I didn't even want to spend $1 for the one. That would have helped. They're so expensive. I'm like, you can let go of a tiny sliver.
Well, I guess it costs a lot, though, to run this hotel, because we're going to tell you guys, or I'm going to tell you guys how large this place is.
It's pretty
crazy.
It's cool to walk the grounds.
But before I go into like all of the hotel details, I think it's really, important to talk about the past and how this hotel even came to be and how this town even came to be, because it was really influenced and shaped by the man who ultimately opened the Stanley Hotel. And I don't think when others like talk about this, they go into much detail, but this guy was really, really cool. And he did a lot of good things, and I think he should be recognized. So let's go back many, many years ago. So the setting for this hotel it was of course not originally called the Estes Valley. It was actually before Rocky Mountain National Park was built and all of that. They found fossils that people were in this area as early as like 12,000 years ago.
Oh, wow.
So they were saying that the original humans came into this area from the Bering Strait land bridge. And like, I don't know why you would pick this area, because it's very, very cold up there, and they get probably more snowfall.
It's cold, but actually as you're coming down into Estes, it's a protected area. You're just surrounded by these mountains, and it was probably a good
safe place to hang until the snow went through. When the Native Americans started finding this area, because there were lots of elk and moose, and there still are today, the Ute and Arapaho, they would actually summer in the Estes Park area, and then they would go further south because it would get so cold. And you'll see that this sounds familiar when we start talking about the hotel. This is really an area that people want to go to in the summertime, because the wintertime gets pretty harsh. There's actually remnants today. If you go to Rocky Mountain National Park, this is just the nerd in me, you can see the trail where the Native Americans would go back and forth over the Continental Divide. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
Let's get closer to why Stanley came here and how he got there. So in about 1800, there were the mountain men started coming to this area, and they were chasing bear and elk, and they were like those grizzly mountain men looking for the pelts, and you can imagine what they may have looked like. And so they were the first ones. And then there was a man named Major Stephen H. Long, who came to the area with the Yellowstone expedition in 1820. And he was the one that first discovered, the white men like to say they discovered.
Yeah, right.
Long's Peak is actually named for him. And this is typical, right? Like, he never even climbed it.
Let's just name a whole mountain after him.
Because he was a white dude that showed up in the 1800s. It is one of the most famous mountains in Colorado. And it's the kind of central point for Rocky Mountain National Park. I think it is the most dangerous mountain to climb in Colorado. People die every year.
I should know more about all this stuff. I mean, living here, I lived here longer than I lived in the other states, which is crazy.
Well, if any of you guys are up for an adventure, Long's Peak is there. About 10,000 people come here every year to try and climb it. Less than half of them make it to the peak.
It's our Everest.
It's our
Everest. I was going to say it's our avalanche.
I will tell you, though, that it's also the mountain that has the most helicopter rescues every year, and people actually die. So make sure you're in good shape. I think sometimes in Colorado, a lot of people come out here thinking, I'm going to climb a mountain. It's serious stuff. So
that's why people come to train here for different sports.
For running especially. But enough about that. I'm not here just to give you mountain history,
we might
but
have
I think
a
it's
lot
interesting.
Of mountain people.
Yeah. I hope you guys are still with us.
Maybe Colorado will like us, because, do you hear it talked about that much in other podcasts? No. Not the ones I listen to. Everybody we listen to is mostly in the Northeast.
It's true. And Colorado has a lot of gems, and we hope to bring that to you guys.
I like that you use the word gems.
Yes, we do have some gems too.
I just never used that word, so now I like the word.
So speaking of gems, the other thing that brought everyone to Colorado was the gold rush.
Yep.
Not quite gems, but all of a sudden everybody wanted to strike it rich. Mm-hmm. And there was a man named Joel Estes. He actually struck it rich out in California, so he already had his fortune. And then he was like, I want to go somewhere pretty, because the parts of California where gold rush probably wasn't the prettiest. And a lot of people were there. So he and his family came across this valley, and he loved it. He was from Kentucky originally. He was out west, didn't want to leave. And he came across this valley, and he moved his wife and 13 children.
Ooh, they were all still alive?
13 children.
That's crazy. Can you imagine that? You're just like hiking around. You're like,
I like this place.
I like this place. Like,
hey,
I'm going to build
13
everything
kiddos.
here.
Y'all want to move here? Interestingly enough, they moved here and they built up a little homestead. They planned to live here and start farming, etc. That didn't work out so well for them. They only stayed about 6 years. But while he was here, a reporter from the Rocky Mountain News, William Byers, came up and he decided that he should name the area after his friend, because I guess he had quite the weekend at the cabin.
Just a weekend.
They had some good brews, whatever. And he was like, you should name this Estes Park. To me, it's better that someone else chose it instead of, just moving there and going, this shall now be Estes Park. He decided he didn't like to live that high of altitude.
Okay.
And farming doesn't work real well when you only have about 4 months where it's not snowing.
I know.
So he's like, well, this was cool and all, but it's been 6 years and I think it's time to go.
Yeah.
So he sold his land to a man named Griff Evans, which there's another mountain named after Griff Evans too. Interestingly enough, Evans Mountain is now being renamed a Native American name.
Good.
Which I'm really, really happy about.
Yeah.
We got to vote on it this year in Colorado. Mm-hmm. And I agree with it because this guy didn't even climb this mountain either. They didn't even do anything. So the reason I'm bringing Evans up is because he was the one that really made this area start popping. He built a dude ranch, the first dude ranch ever, actually. And all of a sudden, all the rich people were like, that sounds fun. There was a big obsession with the Wild West. All these East Coasters were like, I want to be a mountain man. I want to ride horses. I want to rope cattle. So he built this up and started marketing.
Sounds very Colorado of us.
Yeah.
Even today.
Let's capitalize on those tourists. Anyways, one of those famous guests, and you're going to hear him come up again, his name, the Earl of Dunraven. So he was a fancy schmancy guy that wanted to come rough it a little bit, right?
I guess so.
He also went by Lord Dunraven, which is what I'll call him from now instead of Earl.
Was he allowed to have those names, or did he name himself?
I mean, he's from England, so I don't know exactly how all that works.
I don't know either.
But he's a rich dude. He was not known to be a nice guy.
So far, you haven't really told me any mean people yet, and I was expecting there has to be someone in here.
This guy's the not so nice one, and we'll hear about him again later,
okay.
Perhaps hanging out in the Stanley.
Okay.
He fell in love with the area and decided, I'll take it, literally. I'll take it. 15,000 acres of it. He said, this is mine. A lot of people hated him. They did not like him. He was, an outsider, and they had already been building and roughing it up here. And he just came up and was like, it's beautiful. I want to build a house. I'm going to take 15,000 acres, throw money at you. Didn't go over too well. There was many attempts to thwart his ownership, but they were not able because he had so much money.
Right.
So he bought this land.
Okay.
There was another settler that came around this time, and I just thought this was a cool story, so I'm throwing it in here. There was a woman, an English woman named Isabel Bird. She traveled solo to Colorado from Breton in 1873.
By herself.
Badass. She was determined to make it to Estes Park. She'd heard about this dude ranch. She's like, I want to go there.
Oh.
This is cool, right?
Yeah.
And she actually wrote a story called A Lady's Life in the Rocky Mountains. And it included a friendship with this guy. He was a mountain man named Jem. And this bitch, this woman,
this bitch,
she actually summited Long's Peak. So all these other white dudes are coming here.
Oh, bitch in a good way. Sorry.
That's what I'm saying. This bitch, as in like badass bitch.
Yeah.
Climbed Long's Peak.
Okay.
By herself with mountain man
Way
Jem
back then.
in 1873.
And now we have all this stuff when we can't do it.
She was probably climbing in a dress.
Yeah, exactly.
And little booties. Like,
right?
I don't know. I know that has nothing to do with the Stanley, but I just thought that
have you
was
seen
a cool
picture?
Story.
Maybe she was ahead of her time and she was one of those women who wore pants anyway.
I mean, she was solo in that time.
Yeah.
Like, I'm impressed. So now we're getting closer to where did Stanley come from, right?
Yep.
So there was another settler that came in and decided to compete with Lord Dunraven. Well, okay, first of all, Lord Dunraven did not build any lodges. He just built his own house. He was all about himself.
Okay.
So there was the Evans Dude Ranch, and then another guy came along and he was like, I want to get in on this tourist thing. There's room for another one. So he built a place called the Elkhorn Lodge.
That's still there
today.
Yeah, I was like that. I recognize that. Yeah.
Yeah, so he built it, and he's a nice guy.
Wow.
We like
When
him.
did you say that was built in?
He came in like 1896, I think.
So it was built before the Stanley?
It was.
That's awesome. Okay.
And in fact, he and his sons, they did a fish ranch. They had the Dude Ranch that was attracting all the cowboy wannabes. And then this guy, his name was W.E. James, he built Elkhorn Lodge and did a fish ranch so people could come there to fish.
Because the river runs through.
Yeah. And there's tons of trout.
Yeah.
And actually, he and his sons would catch like 500 to 800 trout per day.
Oh my goodness.
And they were the main suppliers to all the restaurants down in Denver.
Makes so much sense.
So they were some cool guys.
Wow.
But the Elkhorn Lodge is what eventually attracted Freeman Stanley. He came to Estes Park in 1903 and he stayed at the Elkhorn Lodge. With that, I want to go into F.O. Stanley. He's the guy. He's the reason the Stanley Hotel exists. He's got a really interesting backstory too. He's actually a twin, which also plays into The Shining.
Okay. I'm waiting to hear everything you have to tell me because like I'm trying to like not say what my brain is considering to be accurate information from what I know. Like, please teach me. Shut up, Jessica.
I hope this isn't boring to everyone. I just think it's really interesting.
Everybody's going to be interested in the Stanley.
Yes.
I mean, that's why it's such a phenomenon worldwide.
So Mr. Stanley, Freelan Oscar Stanley is his name. And so that's where the FO comes from, Freelan Oscar. He was born on June 1st, 1849, alongside his twin brother, Francis Edgar Stanley, who goes by F.E. So we've got F.O. and F.E. are the two Stanley brothers.
Okay.
They were born in Kingfield, Maine.
Oh, they came a long way.
Kingfield, Maine is just a small farming community. It's in the northwest part of Maine. There's only about 650 residents.
Today?
At the time they were born in 1849. So they were raised in a Calvinist household. They're very similar to very strict, like Mormon almost. They didn't drink, didn't cuss, you know, all the fun things in life they didn't do.
Yep, that's why a lot of us leave. Sorry, Mom.
But they were born into what they called small town privilege. The family wasn't really well off, but his father, Solomon Stanley, he was an influential citizen. He was a teacher. He served in several civic positions. So the Stanley name was well known in this little tiny town.
Okay.
And so their household was very well educated. The parents like instilled this knowledge in them of science, poetry, music. So they were well educated. And from a young age, they were encouraged to embrace that. They were in a family of 7 children.
Okay. That's a little bit more doable than 13.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know.
I'm from one of 6, so that's just one
7
more.
seems okay.
It's okay.
So they were kind of in the middle. They had an older brother. They had a younger brother. They had a younger sister. 2 of their brothers, unfortunately, passed away in infancy, as is common back in those days. Yep. But the twins, they were amazing. They had this like natural aptitude for engineering and inventiveness from a young age. At 9 years old, they opened their first business together. I mean, what were you doing at 9? My daughter needs
to get on it, I guess.
I know, right? Why aren't our kids making us money already? But their first business was refining and selling maple sugar at age 9.
At 9?
Mm-hmm.
Did someone teach them or they were like, let me do this?
I'm not real sure. It didn't go into much detail, but
sorry.
They made some decent cash, apparently.
No, everything. Okay.
Well, then by 11, they were like, okay, sugar's not where it's at anymore. So they had a great uncle that taught them how to make violins. So by age 16, F.O. Freeman had completed 3 instruments, and he continued to make these throughout his life, and we'll talk about it more.
I wonder if they're still somewhere.
They are huge collector's items now. They sell for over thousands of, like tens of thousands of dollars.
I want one. I used to play the viola.
Yeah.
You said violin, but I don't care.
It's the violin. It was, he's making these at 11.
I know, that's crazy.
I mean, I guess you only lived to like 30 back then, but.
He's like, I gotta get on it right now.
So it was because their parents didn't have a lot of money. These kids are like scrappy, right? And they're going to figure out how to make money. So it seemed like even as children, they like just discovered ways to earn money because they wanted things and they had big ambitions in their life.
Right.
I can admire that. They went off to college and they decided they were both going to be teachers. They're real close. Freeman was doing great in college, but Francis was like, college is not my jam. I want to be an artiste. Okay. So he runs off to do portraits.
He sounds a lot like me.
I like Francis.
Yeah.
But I like Freeman too. He continues, he finishes his school, and he becomes a headmaster at the high school.
Okay.
In this other small town. And that's where he meets his love of his life, Flora. She's a young teacher, and she's a pianist. So they meet, they get married, everything's going great. And then Freeman, as many people in this time, gets tuberculosis.
Wait, he hasn't even built the Stanley yet.
No.
So he dies?
No.
Oh, okay.
Keep going. Stay with me, Jessica.
Okay.
It's a long story.
Yeah.
he met the love of his life and then finds out he has tuberculosis. So that sucks,
That's rough.
right?
Yeah.
And he was like, you know what? I need a job that gets me out more. Because
Outside.
at the time they were like, yes, tuberculosis, the worst thing you could do is stay in a room with the same stale air.
Right.
And he was a headmaster where he just sat in a school all day. So he was like, I need to get out and do something. I need to lead a less sedentary life. So he had tuberculosis. His younger brother also got tuberculosis. So at the time right now, Freeman Stanley is about 30 years old.
I was just going to ask. Okay.
His brother's 27 and his brother does not make it. His brother passes away.
I thought that they were twins.
That was Francis.
Sorry.
Francis is also 30
Which
since they
brother?
are twins.
I know. When you said 27, I was like, wait a second.
His younger brother, Solomon, passed away.
Okay.
So that was a life-changing event for Freeman. And he was like, fuck this. I'm not going to sit in a schoolroom. I'm going to do something exciting with my life. So he went to catch up with Francis. Francis is over here painting portraits. And Freeman Stanley is like, I'm going to do something to make some money because I need to make money if I want to get out of Maine. So he started a manufacturing company they were little drawing sets that had like a compass and a pen and a pencil and a protractor, and it was in a little case. And
oh my goodness. Was he the first to do that?
I guess so. It was called the Stanley Practical Drawing Set.
I loved those little things. My daughter has something similar that she uses at school
Yeah,
right
I think
now.
we
And she's
buy
gotten
those.
in trouble for it because she opened her calculator
And you like put the
in a math
pencil
class.
and play with it. So it cost him about 25 cents to make, and he sold it for $1. So he started making some pretty good cash. And then his brother at the same time, because these guys are like, they're so impressive. So Francis is over here. Not only is he painting portraits, but he's inventing new process called the dry plate photographic process. So back then when you would go and take pictures, because photography was still a new thing, you would have to wet the plates and then put them in the large thing. He made a way where you could do that ahead of time. It was like a gelatin, and you could put it into the actual camera, and that would allow photographers to travel with their plates. So instead of just being stuck in a studio, you could go take pictures out in nature and such like that.
Okay.
That was a big deal, and that's what Francis was doing. And then all of a sudden, poor Freeman, a fire burned down his drawing pencil manufacturing 1 year after he opened it.
That sucks.
So then his brother's like, I'm sorry, that sucks that your whole factory burned down. Why don't you come work with me? I think these photo plates are going to take off. They got together and they established the Stanley Dry Plate Company, and that's where they made all their money.
Wow.
They became the state of the art. They amassed a small fortune. They're moving on up. 1900, the Stanley Dry Plate Company was grossing close to $100,000 per month.
Wow.
Which, let me just give you perspective. In 1900, $100,000 per month is equal to about $3.5 million today.
Jeez.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
They're doing real well.
And he went from a teacher, headmaster.
He was a teacher.
From an artist to that. Wow.
Yeah. So he and his brother are living the high life. Yep. They moved to Newton.
And they're self-made.
They're self-made men.
Newton, Massachusetts.
And their wives are loving it. They're both married. I don't remember Francis's name. Flora's
finally.
Like, cool. I thought I was going to be a poor headmistress's wife. Awesome. This is where Stanley, when they moved to Newton, because he's not busy enough running a company and making violins and whatever the hell else he's doing, he decides architecture is his jam now, and he wants to do that. So they build custom homes, and then they build a club for all their friends and neighbors. And it had a ballroom, billiard tables, bowling alleys. This will come up again in the Stanley. Freeman was a big bowler. He loved bowling.
So do I. So he has some history up there that he's probably well known for as well. That's cool.
Yeah.
I know someone in Maine. I really want to go to Maine.
So their story doesn't end there, because this is all going to, I promise this is all going to hang with me. It's going to tie in. So their dry plate factory in Newton was located next to an unused bicycle factory.
Okay.
So Francis, the twin brother of Freeman, was fascinated with this new bicycle craze. So this is when bicycles were coming out, and he really wanted his wife. He's like, we got to ride a bicycle. This is so fun. She gets on the bicycle. She falls off. Yep. And she's like, fuck this. I hurt myself. Whatever. I'm never riding it again. And then Francis is like, don't give up on me. I am going to invent a way that we can ride a bicycle together.
Oh my God, the tandem.
And safety and comfort.
Awesome. You're kidding me.
No, it's not the tandem. Yeah. So Francis.
Oh, you're saying it's not the tandem.
He's going to make an automobile.
Okay.
And he starts studying it all. And he was like, I could do a combustion engine. I could do an electrical engine. I could do a steam. And he decided steam was the way to go. So by 1897, Francis sold all his horses and buggies, and he built his automobile using bicycle parts and wagon parts from the unused factory next door.
That's so awesome.
They took it to the Boston Auto Show, and it impressed the crowd so much that they decided, our next venture, we're going to start the Stanley Motor Carriage Company. They continued in business with this, kept making it, and they decided they wanted to focus on automobiles. So they decided this dry plate photo business just isn't as fun. And they ended up selling that business to George Eastman of Kodak. So they made crazy cash there. I didn't quite write it down. And they kept focusing on their cars, and that was their big passion in life. In fact, their Stanley steam car beat a record. They had one called the Rocket Racer. It exceeded the world record for speed, reaching 128 miles per hour.
Really?
So, yeah.
All the way back then? Wow.
But while all of this was going on, Freeman got struck with tuberculosis. He had a difficult recurrence because tuberculosis never goes away.
Okay.
And so in 1903, he got hit hard, and he was like, something's not working. So they decided they needed to move to a drier climate. Life is good. They're the East Coast swank, and they're making tons of money, but tuberculosis will bring you down. Colorado was the logical choice at the time for many seeking. It was known as the mountain cure for tuberculosis: fresh, dry air, lots of sunlight, and a hearty diet. So 1903, they set off to Denver, and they were to receive care from the preeminent American expert on tuberculosis at the time. His name was Dr. Charles Bonney. Interesting tidbit, the first place they stayed while in Denver was the Brown Palace Hotel, which is another famous haunted hotel in Colorado.
It's like one of my favorite places here.
I'm thinking Jessica.
And I've never got to stay there, but I've gone.
I haven't been at all.
You haven't been there?
No. I've driven past it, but I haven't been there.
It's like a dream. They have presidential suites that are like to die for, and I hope someday to be able to afford it just like once.
I have a feeling we'll probably do an episode on Brown Palace.
Maybe they'll let us stay there for free. Probably not.
But Freeman, while they came across the country, he was like, I'm not going anywhere without my car. So he had his car coming out too.
Well, of course, you can't leave that behind, that gym.
No, that gym of a car. So the doctor recommended that he just stays in Denver for a while. He wasn't getting that much better. Dr. Bonney said, I think you should go up in the mountains. So in June, they ventured up to Estes Park. Freeman, being in love with his car, he packed his wife Flora up on a train, and he's like, I'm going to drive my car.
Oh, were there roads for this car at the time?
Not really.
Okay.
Some sources say he got lost along the way.
Sure.
Ended up in Boulder. Another source,
I discovered this town too.
Yeah. Well, Boulder was already like there. He's like, let's name this Stanley. It shows that he ended up a little west of Boulder, actually, and this was documented. And he asked a person, and this is in a little town called Lyons. He pulled up in this like car, and mind you, like nobody in Colorado had seen these kinds of things before.
Right.
This was only on the East Coast. East Coast was like the cosmopolitan part, and we're out in the Wild West now, and he shows up in this car. So he pulls up and he asks this guy, he's like, hey, can you give me somebody to ride along with me?
Oh, yeah.
This 16 mile.
I need some company.
I'm bored. It's a 16-mile trip. And 16 miles back then in this car would take about 2 hours.
I thought that it goes 128 miles an hour.
That's only their race car. He's in their little carriage. And,
okay.
And I'll have to post a picture because this thing is like, I'm trying to figure out how to describe it. It's like a little, if you think of a horse carriage and you cut the top off, you're just hanging out in some seats. That's what it is with a steam engine behind it. It's not real large and it's open top.
Right.
And so the guy he asked was William Welch, and Welch just looked at him like, no, I'm not putting anybody that I know in that motor coach.
That's going to blow up.
Exactly. He's like, I'm not sending anyone. And Stanley, being very proud, like, this is my invention, got up to Estes Park and then called this guy back to be like, just so you know, I made it. And the guy didn't believe him, and he put the he was at like a service station, and he put the service station.
He didn't believe him. Had he blown up, he wouldn't be calling.
He put the service station manager on the phone to confirm that yes, indeed, he did make it in his
I guess he could have walked
car.
if something happened.
I don't know. So they rented a cabin at the Elkhorn Lodge, like I mentioned earlier, and his health just improved dramatically. He was like, this place is magical. I love it. We're going to be here all the time. And of course, when he says that, he doesn't want to be there when it's snowing. He only wants to be there in the summertime. Yeah. So he was like, let's plan to summer here every year. That will keep my tuberculosis in check, right? They met up with Mr. Lord Dunraven, who I mentioned earlier, guy that nobody liked. And all of a sudden, Lord Dunraven, like, nobody liked him, and he was not making any money. People were being mean to him. And he was like, you know what? fuck it, I'm getting out of here. So
good, go away.
he had already sold most of his 15,000K, but he had 6,600 acres left. And that was what was sold to Freeman Stanley. Dunraven told Freeman, he was like, Estes Park has cost me a pretty penny. I hope that it does better for you. And
he's like, well, I know what to do with things.
He's
dude.
like, I won't be an asshole to everyone.
I've built several companies.
So the Stanleys built a little summer cottage, and by a little summer cottage, it was a 4-bedroom with multiple living areas and a modern kitchen because they wanted to entertain guests. Freeman's favorite pastimes included billiards, violins, and his steam car. So he designed a basement with a space that had a billiard table and a detached garage that had his violin workshop. So he continued to do that. And then he designed a garage for his steam car that had a turntable that would turn the car around so you didn't have to back it up.
Oh, just for his car.
Just for his car. This house is actually still there today and on the property of the Stanley Hotel.
You know, I didn't get to walk up, the backside where they have like those little cottages or whatever they are.
Yeah, I think it's back in there. I
so
don't
it
think
must
I've
be
seen
back
this.
there.
Yeah.
Because it was nighttime and I'm like, I can't go creeping up on everybody.
It's actually not open to the public. It has been restored as a historic home, but it's privately owned now. Apparently, it has one of the best views in Estes Park. It opens up. It has a large veranda opening right up onto Long's Peak.
Someone lived there?
Someone lives there.
Oh,
yeah.
Someone does live there?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
But you can see it on the property. By 1907, they'd been living there for about 4 years or summering there. And they were like, I really like it here, but it just doesn't have the same feel to it as the East Coast. We need to bring it up a notch. It's too rustic here. So they were just discontent and they were like, I'm bored. Let's do something else.
Yeah.
They missed the high times. They wanted to host more posh parties, but none of their friends from the East Coast wanted to come and hang out in a dude ranch valley. It seemed kind of boring,
okay.
right? So they were like, let's build a hotel. And that's where the Stanley Hotel started.
Wow.
So it began quickly because he had lots of money from selling his companies. They were designing the Stanley Hotel to cater to the wealthy people like them from their social circle in Massachusetts. Stanley actually created the plans himself because he was gifted in architecture. Stanley was like, I bought this land from Lord Dunraven. I should name the hotel Dunraven Hotel. But nobody liked Dunraven, right? So there was actually a petition signed by 180 people, which was probably the whole town of Estes Park at the time. Yeah. And they were like,
it's still small.
Hell no.
Yeah.
Do not name it that. Please name it after yourself instead.
Why would he be like, well, since I bought it from this guy, I guess I should name it after him?
I think he was a pretty humble guy from everything I read.
Okay.
He's actually a really, really good guy. Freeman Stanley was a nice man. I don't think he had the ego. He's like, I don't need to name it after me. I'll name it after Dunraven. He thought Dunraven was okay. And then all of the people. Why does
everything have to be after someone's name, though? You could just name
it was
it
the white man way back in the day. He wanted to make this a state-of-the-art hotel. He wanted it to be fully electric. So in order to do that, there was no electricity in the area. So he was like, that's cool. I got lots of money.
He's like, I know how to do this stuff.
Actually, he doesn't, but he's like, I'm going to figure it out.
Yeah.
Because that's what he did. And so he built and operated a hydro plant on Fall River, and he established the Estes Park Light and Power Electric Company. He built distribution lines throughout the town, and he allowed other residents to use the electrical lines. So he brought this to the company, and they could purchase power for their homes. So he brought them into the 1900s?
20th? I don't know.
20th century.
20th century?
But he didn't stop there. He was like, I think it'd be really cool if we had running water. So he also established the first distributed water.
Maybe that's why the Stanley's so popular, because it was already set up for this stuff.
Before I get into the details of the hotel, because I want to talk about the architecture and all of that, I just want to close out with a few more nuggets of information about Freeman, because I think he's a really cool guy. He built a big legacy in Estes Park, not only this beautiful hotel, but he did so many things for the town and the people. Along with the electric and water companies, he also established a sewer service there. He improved the road so that people could go back and forth.
He needed to use his cars.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
That had a little bit of selfish interest.
I'm sure.
He also organized local citizen groups for major town projects. And Freeman and Flora never had children, but they were known as wonderful people towards the children. He was known to often give kids dimes when they were coming by. He'd just be like, here's a dime. And that was a big deal back then to go to the dime store. Or he'd give them little trinkets. He would offer them rides. This sounds kind of creepy, but I don't think it was creepy back then. He would offer them rides in his steamer car, which was really cool for the kids, right? He would dress up as a Western man and wear woolly chaps and wear the big tall hat and take silly pictures. And the kids actually coined him the King of Estes Park, and they made him a little crown out of a tin canister, and he would wear that and take pictures with the kids. And it just sounds like he was like the uncle they all loved.
They're like, thank God that Lord somebody, whatever,
fuck
is gone.
Lord Dunraven. Yeah, he was probably like, I don't know, kicking the kids.
Yeah.
The other thing that Stanley did is he was the biggest advocate, along with another man named Enos Mills. And he funded Enos Mills to go around and ask the government and get support to protect the land up there and make it the Rocky Mountain National Park. Otherwise, it would have, God knows what they would have done there. Mined it. And it is now the 4th most visited park in the U.S. And it's beautiful. I recommend everyone go there. See the Stanley, go to Rocky Mountain National Park. He also deeded 54 acres of land to the town of Estes Park, and that's still there today. That's actually where they built the man-made lake. It's where the fairgrounds are. There's a dog park. The Estes Park Events Complex sits there. So he was just a real benevolent man. He was a great example of leadership, and he shaped the way the town is today. So we owe a lot to him. It's not just the hotel, like I said.
Yeah, and that's why I'm glad you're doing this, because everybody like just approaches
people
it
should
from
know
the
him.
Paranormal or what's been happening there and how like The Shining was made. But it's a really cool history how it all came to be and just how influent and he's a good guy and he's not Lord Fuckface.
Exactly, and this is what we need more, rich citizens to do in this country. Use
their money for good.
Yeah. There was a book written called Mr. Stanley of Estes Park, and I just thought this was a cool quote. He said, what Stanley showed is that government, left to its own devices, couldn't have done these things.
Nope.
One of the interesting things is that because of what Stanley did, while Estes Park was platted in the spring of 1905, the town did not incorporate until 1917. Why do most towns incorporate? They need tax dollars to do civic things. Stanley, in his giving gifts and organizing citizens to complete larger town projects, made incorporation and tax raising unnecessary for 12 years. That's extraordinary. Are there other people like Stanley to step up and do for the 21st century what he did for the 20th? I hope so. So,
me too.
The Stanleys continue to go back and forth, and Freeman Stanley actually lived until he was 91 years old.
Wow.
With tuberculosis.
That's crazy.
So Colorado
So it
healed
worked for him, but I would argue that happiness is what saved his life.
I agree.
Yes.
He was also married to Flora for 63 years.
Oh.
She passed away from a stroke, and he died just 1 year later.
Oh.
So they were like really sweet.
That's real love stuff.
And I also tell you about these two, not only because they were very, very good people, but they're still supposedly at the Stanley Hotel today.
Okay. I can't wait to meet them.
I just wanted to jump in here and say that we use the wrong name when talking about Stanley. So his name is Freelan and not Freeman. So please forgive us and we will do better in the future. Thanks.
Well, so now I want to get into the Stanley Hotel itself. It's a magnificent building.
It's beautiful.
For anyone who's been there. Mm-hmm. You will notice as you drive into Estes Park, it is kind of a valley, and this hotel sets up on the hill. So Stanley actually he was very strategic about where he put the Stanley Hotel. He wanted it to be up there. He wanted it to have the best vantage point in Estes Park. Similar to his house, it has the veranda that's overlooking Long's Peak, which is the big central point of Rocky Mountain National Park. Some people say they feel like it's eerily looking down on the town, but this was quite the feat of architecture and top of the line, as I mentioned earlier, when it opened. It actually opened on July 4th, 1909. So as you can imagine, there was probably fireworks and like a big to-do when it opened. And what do I mean by top of the line? So the Stanley was the first hotel to be fully electric. It also had a steam laundry, which was not common in the time, and the brothers like the steam.
All their rich friends were coming to stay.
Yes, they had to impress them. They wanted them to stay and have posh parties.
Yep.
It had a hydraulic elevator. It had telephones in the guest rooms. That wasn't done.
Wow.
And there were 48 guest rooms when it was first built, and each pair shared a bathroom, and the bathrooms were connected to the rooms. This was not common back then. When you stayed at a hotel, there would be community bathrooms.
Okay.
So that was a big deal. You were sharing, but sharing with one other room.
That's still how it is, because we haven't stayed there.
It is not. It's been renovated several times. This was the original. The bathrooms also had running tap water, which I kind of mentioned earlier, since he built water company to do that. Mm-hmm. This is also not something, running tap was not big at the time.
Right.
So everybody was hearing about this hotel and they're like, I got to see this because it was like new. He did also equip everything. It was a first fully electric hotel, but he knew that when they were building, and I'm bringing this up because it's going to come into play, built it where there would be gas lanterns in all of the rooms because with it being new, he didn't want like the electricity go out for some reason. So they also had that option where you could light gas lanterns or if there were storms because it is Colorado and in the mountains, we get a lot of storms. So the outside of the hotel was built in a Georgian style. This was not something you would have ever seen in Colorado at the time. It was something that was very popular with the East Coast socialites. The style of the hotel contrasted with the rustic style of all the other lodges in Estes Park, so it stood out even more. It was not an uncommon choice, like I mentioned, on the East Coast. It wasn't uncommon for the size and the quality of the hotel for this time period. It was just odd to be in the Colorado mountains looking this beautiful.
Yeah.
It was originally painted a yellow, and I'm going to mispronounce this, ochre, ochre color.
Okay.
And then it had white accents and trim. And I actually have a picture of the original.
Okay.
And I will post that to the socials because it looks quite different. In 1935, when it was later renovated, that's when it was changed to the white color that everyone knows it for today.
Right.
But it was originally yellow. So the floor plan of the main hotel was laid out to accommodate the popular activities back at that time of the American upper class. So they built the music room and it had cream colored walls, pictures, classical plaster work. So it was very ornate, and it was designed for letter writing during the day. So that's what the upper class like to do during the day, apparently, is write letters.
Don't we have phones?
They have phones, but they're still writing letters because not everybody has phones. So while you might have a phone in your room, who are you calling? Because most people don't have phones.
Okay.
And then at night, they would play chamber music. That was more of the feminine, like the women would hang out and write letters all day and maybe, practice calligraphy, and then they would listen to chamber music at night. And then there was the masculine side where all the men would hang out, and that was the smoking lounge. It's called the Pinion Room today, and it had an adjoining billiard room. And it was dark stained wood. So you can see like the opposite. Like the music room was all light and pretty and ornate and windows. And then you had the dark, rustic, stained wood billiards room. I am too. I'd want to hang out in both.
Yeah.
And then it had a big granite arch fireplace for men to sit and drink scotch, brandy, whatever
and smoke their cigars.
Actually, Stanley, as I mentioned before, was raised in a very conservative household. So he did not drink. And being that he had tuberculosis, he did not drink cigars, but he built this.
Drink cigars? I'm glad.
That would be really gross. He did not smoke cigars. Yeah. But he knew that that was an essential, to attract that upper level man. He's going to need his place. So he built that for them. But he was quite the pool shark, apparently. Billiards was a big thing for Freeman Stanley.
So am I.
Are you?
I am. I have some stories to that. But I don't know if I'm ready to give out my history of my life to everybody just yet.
No, you have
some
to wait.
Things are a little sensitive, but yes, I
Keep
used
listening.
to play pool for a long time, and my daughter exists because of it.
Ooh, that sounds like a good story for the future. So outside of the main building, there's the concert hall, and this is a really sweet story. Freeman actually built this for his beloved wife, Flora, because she was very into piano playing. Modeled this after the Boston Symphony Hall, which is what they were familiar with. So it's a beautiful, ornate building. They built a stage there for theatrical performances, and it features a trap door so that people could go in and out.
Yeah.
And that's still there today. And then he built the lower level as a 2-lane bowling alley because that was one of his other favorite hobbies.
Me too.
Unfortunately, the bowling alley is not there anymore.
Oh, that sucks.
They ripped it out. I wish it was still there.
That would be a really cool history piece to go see.
And there's like concerts there today. And if you go on the ghost tour, you go into the concert hall because there's a lot of activity there, which we'll talk about in a minute. Yeah, it was built as a gift to Flora. So she had a place to play her piano and host, famous musicians and put theatrical presentations on. So
okay, we will be going back.
Absolutely.
Again and again.
I want to go like 1,000 times. Yeah. Especially now I know even more. Like I never knew this level of detail about the Stanley.
It's expensive, okay?
Yeah. Especially if you want to stay in some of the fun rooms. So then there was a smaller hotel and it's still there today, and it's between the main structure and the concert hall. And it's basically the main hotel on like a scaled down version.
Okay.
Unlike, and I didn't mention this earlier, the hotel was not heated. This was a summer resort. So they did not build it with heating because it was only going to be open in the summertime. But when he built this manor, it was called the Stanley Manor. and it was in between like I said, the hotel and the concert hall, he did make sure this was fully heated. And I think it was because the Stanley family planned to use it as a winter resort when the main building was closed for the season. So either they could come there or some of their friends could come stay there in the winter time. If you could get up the roads. I don't know how you would have gotten up the roads at that time.
Is this the one, like if you're looking down in the city again from the main building, it's the one that's like directly below you?
So the main building, and then to the right is it's called the Lodge, I think, today. And then the concert hall. Okay, so it's kind of in the middle.
Okay.
So Stanley built this thinking that at some point Estes Park might become like a ski resort similar to Vail and Breckenridge, but Estes Park never took off as a ski resort. So that manor was basically never used. It was empty most of the year. So I also want to mention that Stanley's steam car played a pivotal role in the hotel's operation. They wanted to use that, and you'll still see like some models of that today. I think there's a car in front of the hotel. But he built a 12-seat model of his steam car to transport guests up and down from Denver. Mm-hmm. And it was
from Denver?
Yeah, because that's I think where everybody would come to. And then, or maybe it was from Boulder.
So he rated the first
don't quote me.
Too. Jeez.
I mean, this guy just best guy ever. It was marketed as the mountain wagon is what they called it, and it actually became really popular, and other resorts throughout the U.S. started using these 12-car buses to get people there. Other notable spots on the hotel grounds include a large garden area with fountains. There was a carriage house, a gatehouse, a manager's cottage, and my favorite, a small pet cemetery built to bury the caretaker's lost beloved animals.
Where is that?
It's still there today.
We need to go during the day.
Yeah. I've gone at night and during the day. Okay. We went back in the day to see the pet cemetery specifically. So the hotel was booming, as you can imagine. Everybody was coming out here. But at one point, Freeman, as he got older, he was like, I'm tired of running a hotel. I just want to chill. He created his own trust and put the hotel into that trust. But unfortunately, when he stopped funding it, it wasn't making enough money to keep it self-supported, and they fell into bankruptcy.
Oh no.
And Freeman's,
all that time?
I know.
That's
it was really sad.
He's done so much.
And then in 1929, he was like, I'm not going to let my hotel go into bankruptcy. And he purchased it back himself with more money. It has changed hands many, many times. It's gone through several expansions, adding more guest rooms. By the 1970s, however, this once majestic hotel had fallen into grave disrepair to years of neglect and lack of investment back into it. The Stanley could have easily been demolished had it not been for a bizarre and fateful occurrence that brought a now well-known author to the hotel to have a most famous nightmare.
Ooh, who is it?
Who would it be?
Oh my gosh.
Well, let's talk about Stephen King. I was obsessed with Stephen King in junior high. He was my favorite author. I read all his books. So I think that's another reason I wanted to do this episode. So he was newly in his career at this time. He had only written 2 books. So Carrie, which everyone loves Carrie, and Salem's Lot.
Okay.
So those were both set in the small towns, as everyone knows, in Maine. Castle Rock, Maine is his part. And he was like, I need a change of pace. I need to go somewhere different. So he wanted to spend a year away from Maine so that his next novel would have a different sort of background and not everything was in Maine.
Right.
So Stephen King opened an atlas on his kitchen table and he just randomly pointed somewhere and he landed in Boulder, Colorado.
That's so fucking creepy.
Isn't that crazy?
Well, because of Freeman. They were in Maine.
Yeah,
right?
Freeman came from Maine. There's a lot of weird...
That's crazy.
Yeah. So Freeman came from Maine and built this hotel. And then Stephen King comes from Maine.
And he just
randomly ends up
on a map.
In Boulder, Colorado.
Okay.
So they had been hanging out in Boulder, Colorado, and they're like, let's go up into the mountains. So on October 30th of 1974, King and his wife, Tabitha, decided to come up to Estes Park, and they went to check into the Stanley Hotel. So it was October 30th, and at this time in the 70s, the hotel would still shut down because when the winter came, it was too cold. It wasn't heated.
Okay.
They didn't have snow removal, very similar to the story of The Shining.
Yeah.
So you can see where the references came from, inspiration. Yeah. They were the only 2 guests in the hotel that night. And Stephen King said, when we arrived, they were just getting ready to close for the season, and we found ourselves the only guests in the place with all those long, empty corridors. So 10 years earlier, King had read Ray Bradbury's short story, The Veldt, and he was inspired to write a story about a person whose dreams would become real.
Oh, dreams.
Very connected to the lucid dreaming, right?
Okay.
In 1972, King had started a novel entitled Darkshine, which was to be about a psychic boy in a psychic amusement park. But the idea just never came to fruition, and he abandoned the book. during the night at the Stanley, that story came back to him.
Okay.
And he was like, dreams come to life, psychic boy. You see where I'm going with this if you know The Shining. So that night, Stephen King and his wife had dinner in the grand dining room.
By themselves?
And they were totally alone.
Okay.
And he said it was weird. They were offered one choice for dinner. The only meal that they still had available.
I don't know.
He didn't say what it was.
Okay.
And he said they had this taped orchestra music that was playing, and theirs was the only table set for dining. He said, except for our table, all the chairs were up on the tables. So the music is echoing down the hall. And he said it was like God had put me there to hear that and see those things. And by the time I went to bed that night, I had already started like putting this book in my mind.
That's cool.
After dinner, his wife decided to turn in, but King was like, I'm going to walk around this empty hotel. And he ended up in the bar.
Same.
He ended up in the bar, right?
Well, I mean, all of it.
Where do we always end up when we wander?
I think it's so cool that there are people when in a situation like that, they're inspired. It's those like weird moments for me that I'm like, okay, what can I take from this moment?
Yeah.
What is it? And that's why I love.
And I'm just like hearing the story and I'm picturing The Shining. It's just, it's amazing. Stephen King said that night, he went to the bar and he was served drinks by a bartender named Grady. So he just sat there at the bar, just him and the bartender, which is also a famous scene in The Shining. So I hope I'm not spoiling The Shining for anyone. If you haven't seen it, watch it.
I mean, if you haven't at this point, all we're going to do is either convince you to go watch it finally in your life or you know what's happening.
So Stephen King said, that night I dreamed of my 3-year-old son. And it was also quoted, I wanted to bring this up because we talked about lucid dreaming last week. Mm-hmm. This felt like a lucid dream to him.
Okay.
And he had also been writing about a dream coming to life. So there was some connection here when I'm reading this. I'm like, check it out.
I
lucid
said we'd
dreaming.
Sprinkle it in somewhere.
It's sprinkled in here. Yeah. So he said that night I dreamed of my 3-year-old son running through the corridors. He was looking over his shoulders, eyes wide, screaming, and he was being chased by a fire hose.
By a fire hose.
He said he woke up with a tremendous jerk. He was like sweating all over. He said he almost fell out of the bed. He was just like, oh my God.
Yeah.
He said he got up, he lit a cigarette, and he sat in a chair.
Maybe it was warning him not to light a cigarette because he is the fire hose.
The fire hose is like, I'm going to get you.
I'm burn down this house.
So he said he was sitting in a chair looking out at this beautiful view of the Rockies. And he was like, by the time he finished smoking that one cigarette, he like had a whole outline for his book.
That's awesome.
So The Shining is a book that was released in 1977. It was his third published novel and it was his first bestseller.
That's awesome. And then Carrie and Salem's Lot became something else.
Yeah.
His entire life.
But The Shining was really
successful.
what set him off.
Yep.
And then people went back to his earlier ones. The novel was adapted into a 1980 film by Stanley Kubrick. And then there was also a 1997 miniseries. I want to talk about that. So just a quick rundown in case you haven't seen The Shining. It centers on a man named Jack Torrance, and he was a struggling writer. Kind of goes along with Stephen King. He was a recovering alcoholic, which Stephen King has spoken openly about. And he accepts the position as the off-season caretaker of the historic Overlook Hotel in the Colorado Rockies.
I mean, I've looked at jobs like that, and I'm like, I might go crazy.
Right.
But I don't know. They have stuff like that here in Colorado. Like, come take care of this area.
I don't
during
think
the
I
winter.
could do it. Like, yeah, I don't know. Anyways, he goes up there. His family goes with him in the book. Like, he brings his son, and his son possesses what's called the Shining, which is a psychic ability, which goes back to that earlier story that Stephen King.
Was it Dark?
Yeah. It
Dark
was
Shine.
Dark Shine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he incorporated that in
remember
there.
Things. Okay.
Yeah, you're getting better. And so the psychic abilities allows the child to glimpse the hotel's horrific true nature. So I'm not going to spoil it.
Stuff.
But they go up there at the end of the season, just like Stephen King did. That's how the book starts. And they get stuck up there because of a winter storm and all kinds of crazy, scary, murderous things happen.
Yeah.
So there's a popular belief out there that the Stanley Hotel was used in Stanley Kubrick's movie for The Shining, but it wasn't. So the actual hotel used in the 1980 movie was the Timberline Lodge in Mount Hood, Oregon.
Which is interesting.
And that was just for the outside. Like when you saw the view of the outside of the hotel, it was the Oregon movie, but all the inside was a movie set in Hollywood. I'm sorry, it wasn't in Hollywood. It was in England.
An extension of Hollywood.
So really, the Stanley didn't have anything specifically to do with the movie. It was just that inspiration and Stephen King having that crazy lucid dream and just that eerie feeling of being in the Stanley is what inspired The Shining, which I think is kind of even cooler than it just being a set for the movie.
Yeah.
Like the Stanley spoke to him and brought this book alive.
That just goes to show you how powerful the book is, because the Stanley still became important and this, landmark, regardless of this movie that didn't actually match what you can go see and stand at. So
I think a lot of people know this, but I wanted to share with you. Stephen King was not a fan of Stanley Kubrick's movie.
Yep, I know that. Yeah.
He thought that it was a little hokey. He thought it didn't show the madness of Jack Torrance in the way that he wanted. He felt like it was just a little too artsy, and he really wanted to show like Jack Torrance and his descent into madness more. And he thought that the way, and there's a lot out there about how the actress was treated in the original Shining. Yeah. She was kind of tormented and he wanted a different kind of woman, because he had written the character in his book as a very strong woman, and the way that they portrayed her in the movie, he did not care for.
But I love her too.
I know. I like it so much, but that is why in 1997, or Stephen King started long before 1997. That's when the miniseries came out, but he started ideating what he wanted his series to look like.
Right.
So he wanted to adapt it. So the first character that Stephen King wanted to cast was for the role of Wendy Torrance, so Jack's wife, because he felt like she wasn't done justice in the original movie. Yep. So he chose Rebecca De Mornay, who was a very famous actress back in the 80s.
She's in so many things.
I remember her from The Hand That Rocks the Cradle.
Yeah.
It was one of the coolest movies ever. So if you haven't seen that, I really like it. It's a creepy thriller type movie. Anyways, he chose her, and he helped write the script because he wanted it to be creepier, more disturbing, and more entertaining than the original movie.
Stephen King.
Of course. And it's his baby. That was like his most famous book, or like the one that really broke him through in writing. The other thing he wanted it to be filmed at the Stanley.
Makes sense.
That was his inspiration. And he was like, I want this to be where, the idea came to me.
Yep.
They did some renovations to get it ready. They painted some of the areas of the Stanley that were white, brown. They wanted it to be a darker, like feel more ominous. So they did some changes to get ready, and then it started shooting in the Stanley Hotel in March of 1996. So they chose March because that's usually when all the snow comes.
That makes sense. And this is like almost 20 years later.
Well, the year they chose it happened to be a year that Estes Park got the least amount of snow.
Oh, gosh darn it.
So, yeah, they had to spend $100,000.
I mean, that's how it works, right?
They had to spend $100,000 to make snow.
Oh, my goodness.
So that was, part of that. They did kind of right the wrong, I guess, in Stephen King's mind by filming it. The miniseries was not as popular. It received critical acclaim, but a lot of fans still prefer the Stanley Kubrick movie. It's what they grew up in. They love Jack Nicholson, honestly.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I love Jack Nicholson too.
Yeah.
But you can love both, and I always like to honor the writer.
And I actually did watch the miniseries when it came out. I was like 17 years old, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I thought it was good. I enjoy the original movie. I like them both. They're different. I do think it's cool that this one was actually filmed at the Stanley, and it's a 3-part miniseries. So I think you can find it. I should have looked that up. I don't know where you can watch it today, but I'm sure it's out there.
That changes anyway. Right. You just Google it now and it shows you where you can watch this.
With The Shining, that's when everyone really started paying attention to the Stanley. So back in the 70s, 1980, when the original movie came out, everyone knew, and I guess during the interviews heard that Stephen King was inspired by the Stanley. A lot of people falsely believed it was videoed there or produced there. And so that's what started bringing more people to the Stanley. And interestingly enough, that's when a lot of the information about the hauntings at the hotel really came to light. So if Stephen King hadn't been there, this place could have been torn down and nobody would have known.
That's so sad. Yeah, he saved it.
So to me, it's like the ghosts were like inspiring him in this lucid dream to bring people here.
Freeman had died and he was there.
Yeah, and Freeman is there. I'm going to tell you about him.
And then, he brought him there.
He's like, he doesn't want his legacy to die, right?
Finger on a map.
That totally makes sense.
He bought his own hotel back at one point just to save it.
Freeman loved this. And Freeman did so much for Estes Park. We can't tear this hotel down, and it may have been. So thank God it all worked out the way it did. In The Shining, you remember the scene with the hedge maze.
Yep.
It's a big part of the movie. It's
a
creepy.
huge part, yeah.
The Stanley didn't have a hedge
No,
maze.
right.
This was something completely out of Stephen King's, horror mind to create this hedge maze.
Mm-hmm.
But the Stanley realized when visitors started coming that they were looking for the hedge maze.
Right.
Because they thought it had
It's a
been
big
filmed
part,
there.
right?
And it took them a while, but in 2015, to accommodate that and to really, lean into the Shining experience, they did add a hedge maze, but it's a pretty small replica.
It's pretty tiny.
Yeah. But it is there.
Pictures more than anything, I would assume. You stand in front of it and take
just
a picture.
for the nostalgia. I tried to visit it.
They don't need to lose
there.
actual children in there.
No, we don't need the hedge maze to come alive.
This isn't Harry Potter.
The hedge maze, I didn't get to experience it because it was completely iced over. I went in my first trip to the Stanley. I went in, I think it was a December. So
yeah,
hedge maze wasn't happening. It was probably 10 degrees outside.
And then when we went, it was under construction.
Yeah, we couldn't even go because I was so excited when we went. I was like, oh, I can go in the hedge maze. And then it was under construction.
Half of the bushes were missing.
Yeah, that wouldn't have been much of a maze. We would have finished in a second. I want to move on to the fun part.
Okay, fine.
Are you ready for this? I know y'all have.
But thank you so much
forever.
for the history, because not a lot of people go into it, and now I feel like when people go, it's going to mean so much more. You're going to know how it came to be, and when you see the cars and stuff, you're like, Freeman. First he was this schoolmaster, and then he made Lisa Frank. And he helped with cameras, and he made a car, and he came all the way over here, even with tuberculosis. He lived till 91, and he loved this place.
He did,
and now you can appreciate it a little bit more, and you will love the ghosts inside.
Yes. So let's go to the ghosts. Let's get to the fun stuff. So there's a lot of prominent ghosts known to haunt this hotel. Fortunately, most of the ghosts at the Stanley are actually pretty friendly. They may spook some of the guests. I mean, I think most ghosts are. They don't seem to have malevolent reasons. So as I've mentioned before, the Stanley Hotel is a repeat guest on most haunted lists. It's most definitely worth a day trip. If you come to Denver, I think you should come there. It's hosted its fair share of paranormal investigators from shows like the Travel Channel's Ghost Hunters and Sci-Fi's Ghost Adventures. And there's actually a hotel paranormal investigator.
Stays
as
there?
part of the hotel. And her name is Lisa Neihart. And she leads monthly.
I'm just kidding.
So if you really want to get into it, she leads monthly ghost hunts. And so those are more in depth. You can take the 90-minute ghost tour like I took, but she will lead paranormal investigations, which I think is pretty cool. Maybe we should go do one. But she likes to call the Stanley Hotel the Disneyland for ghosts.
Yeah.
It's like the Haunted Mansion. The most notable is Freeman Stanley himself. He's most often seen in the lobby and the billiard room, his favorite place, right? That was his favorite room when he was still alive. On one such occasion, actually, he was said to have appeared during a tour group's visit to the billiard room. He materialized behind a member of the tour.
He must have liked someone in there.
He wanted to, play some pool with them.
He called Stephen King to come, so.
I know. So several bartenders who have worked at the hotel report having seen Freeman strolling through the bar. He disappears when they try to cut him off at the kitchen. So
cut him off?
They're trying to catch him or something.
Don't go in there. That's not for you.
Don't go in there. And he's like, fine, I'll just disappear. So not to be left out, Flora is like, Freeman doesn't get to have all the fun, or Freelan. Flora was like, I want to haunt the hotel as well. So she is known to continue to entertain guests with her piano playing in the music room. So that's where her grand piano sits today, and it's behind a velvet rope. So if you do a tour,
she used?
It was her piano.
Nice. I didn't get to go in there.
I think you can only go on the tour if you perhaps have an event in the music room. So employees and guests both have reported hearing music coming from the room. And when they take a peek in there, they can see the piano keys actually moving. However, the saying goes, or the legend is, that as soon as someone walks across the threshold to investigate further, the music will stop and no more movement can be seen up on the keys of the piano. This is the other fun part. It's beautiful music, and those who have tried to touch the keys
get zapped.
It will actually slam shut on their fingers. So people have had their fingers crushed because she's like, no, not for you. The staff reports hearing music playing after hours very often. They will sometimes think that there's teenagers in there pranking, and they'll go in and turn on the lights to shoo off these, pesky teenagers, and no one will be in there.
I mean, what do you do in a situation like that? You're like, can I just have one normal night? I mean, I have to investigate because it might be actual like damage to our property.
Right. And then you go in and you're like, nope, it's just Flora again. She's
exactly.
just playing away. But don't touch it. She might slam your fingers shut. The other thing that has happened in the music room, staff has reported that they will hear music and chattering as if like back in the day when everyone was partying in there. It's been reported to hear laughter, glasses clinking. They'll think that there's like people in the room, and when they open it, it'll be completely empty and dark. So that's
I'm just like picturing from what I remember, like standing outside that building. I want to go dance in there. I'm just picturing more kind of like a ballroom.
Well, you're thinking of the concert hall. I'm talking about the music room. It's actually inside the main building.
Oh, it's in the building.
It's in the main building. So when you walk in, it's over to the right. It's like an area. I think you can rent it out today for events.
I didn't get to see that. So what did you call it?
The concert hall. That's actually where I'm going. This is a great segue. I'm going to talk about the concert hall next.
Well, this whole time I've been picturing the building next to the Stanley.
He built the concert hall for Flora, but her piano resides inside the main building in the music room.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's where her spirit seems to manifest. Okay. Because she wants to play her piano. So that was a good segue. Let's start talking about the concert hall because there's a lot of paranormal hubbub said to be happening in this space. The most famous ghost there, his name is Paul. And Paul was a handyman, kind of jack of all trades that did things around the Stanley Hotel. Okay. I think he was around in the 1980s. I couldn't exactly find when he worked there. But he had an unfortunate incident happen. He started having chest pains while he was working. And while they were transporting him to the hospital, he actually passed away. So that's why they think that his spirit is still there in the concert hall today. One of his duties was to enforce the 11 p.m. curfew at the time that he was working there at the hotel to get everybody out of the concert halls and get back to the guest room so that we're not, disrupting. That's why guests and workers report hearing somebody whispering to them,
"Go to bed.
Get out. Get out." And they hear it late at night.
Okay.
So they think it's Paul. Just doing his job.
He's like, and I freaking died having a heart attack here. Listen to me. I need a rest. I'm stuck. Go away.
So there's also a piano in the concert hall. It's not Flora's piano, but there's another piano. And some people have reported that Flora floats over there and plays that piano as well.
She's like, well, you're using mine. And I have to go use this other one.
Maybe that's it. Maybe it's the nights when her room is being taken.
Maybe.
Another just little story about Paul, the handyman. There was a construction worker. He was working there one day and he was sanding the floors and he felt somebody pull the back of his shirt. And he thinks it was Paul, nudging him because it was getting late into the night and it was time for him to go.
I need someone to nudge my shirt when I need to go to bed when I'm working.
Right. Time to give it up.
It's time, Jess.
Time to stop editing
Go to sleep.
Kendra's mess ups.
Mine too.
There's also been some people on the Stanley Ghost Tour that have reported seeing a flickering flashlight at them, and they think that could be Paul as well. Another way for him to tell people to get the hell out. So there is one other ghost in the concert hall.
Okay.
And she lives down in the basement. And when I went on the ghost tour, I have to say, I didn't have any specific paranormal events that happened to me, but there was definitely some kind of energy in the basement of the concert hall. I could feel it. And we went in the bathroom and the lights were flickering in the bathroom and it felt just...
Wait, in the concert hall?
In the concert hall.
Well, I had lights flickering, but I wasn't in the concert hall.
Well, let's talk about that in a minute.
Well, okay, fine, in a minute.
But the bathroom, there was something to it. And we went into there was an area where musicians and whoever's performing, they work beforehand, kind of like the green room, I guess is what you call it.
Okay.
And that's one of the most active areas in the basement. And I could feel it there. So who they believe is haunting, and this is a sad story, who they believe is haunting the basement of the concert hall is a girl named Lucy.
Okay.
And so this was back in the early, I think 40s to 60s time frame is when she was presumed to have lived. And they don't really know her exact age. She was a young girl. She was probably age 12 to 19 is what I've seen in different accounts.
Okay.
And the story goes that she was kind of a stowaway in a way, a runaway. She was just sleeping there was a lot of construction going on at the hotel at the time, and she was homeless essentially, and she was living in the basement of the concert hall.
Okay.
And was kind of squatting there, and the construction workers found her and they're like, you need to go. And I guess they didn't send her anywhere nice, or she was scared or whatever, but she left the hotel, and it's believed that she froze to death.
I heard this too, but I thought it was a more recent death.
I thought I did good research, but I couldn't find the dates on all of these. So
I may be wrong.
I found when researching the Stanley, there's a lot of misinformation, and I'll go into that in another story.
It's hard to research people.
It's like the game of gossip, you know, like
Exactly.
people start saying
you
things
try
and
to
it's not
fact
necessarily
check
true.
as much as you can.
And I looked at multiple sources. So I kept it kind of vague because I couldn't find stories that collaborated each other. And some of them, when I get into the rooms, there's different, I don't know, there's just a lot of things.
Yeah.
So
either way, that's really sad.
it is very sad. So Lucy passed away, froze to death, and the historians at the Stanley can't confirm the story. So it is kind of more of a tall tale in a way. And maybe that's why I couldn't find.
And maybe that's why the stories are different.
I think so.
It's just morphed into different times.
Right. I will tell you that people report feeling her down in the bathroom. As I mentioned, flashing lights are the big thing that they think that she communicates with. And then there's actually a picture out there of a man on a tour, and he took the picture and it has the tour guide leader in the front. Nobody's behind him, and there is an image of a little girl in a pink dress. Like you can see the hot pink.
Oh,
and he was like, there was nobody in hot pink. He's like, we would have, on that tour. And I would love to post that picture for everyone to see, and you can decide for yourself.
Yeah.
But I do know of everywhere we went in the ghost tour, there were 2 spots where I felt the presence, and the basement of the concert hall was one of them.
Okay.
So now I want to move back to the main building. And when you walk into the Stanley, there is the grand staircase. It's beautiful. They didn't even take us up that on the tour that I went on. They will take you up the grand staircase on a day tour, but the night tour they won't, because they don't want to disrupt their guests.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense.
So there are all kinds of antique mirrors and portraits along this staircase. It's beautiful. I will post a picture. But it's believed, and it's been called the Vortex, because they believe that it's a popular passageway for the hotel's ghosts to move between the afterlife and into our lives, I guess. It's had some like paranormal, like when investigate. Yeah, kind of something like that. In 2016, there was a visitor from Houston, and he snapped some photos on the grand staircase, and he was just taking a picture because the staircase is beautiful and a lot of people take it. And he got home, and when he was reviewing it, he spotted a figure at the top of the staircase. He said he doesn't remember anyone being on the staircase at the time, and it is a woman, and she's wearing attire that would not have gone with 2016. And I also have that picture to share. Okay, I want to go into room 217. Room 217, if you guys remember, is where Stephen King stayed. Mm-hmm. It's probably the most famous spot in the Stanley Hotel. I think if you want to book it, it's probably years out right now.
I think so, yeah.
The cool thing about this, as you know, it was the inspiration for his bestseller, The Shining, and it has a beautiful view, and they added a library of Stephen King novels to this room.
That's cool. Yeah.
But, and this may be what inspired Stephen King, and perhaps there was a presence in that room when he stayed there. He just didn't realize it, and it was, directing what happened in his dream. But the room is thought to be haunted by Elizabeth Wilson, although there's some contradictions if that's actually her name, which I'll go into in a minute.
Okay.
But that's, if you look at most sources, they'll say it's haunted by Elizabeth Wilson. The hotel was fully electric, as I mentioned earlier.
Right.
However, Stanley had taken it upon himself to install a gas lantern in each room to make sure that guests would never be left without light. So there was a storm in 1911, and the chambermaid was going from room to room to light the gas lanterns for the guests. She entered room 217 to light the candle, and apparently there was a gas leak in there. And as soon as she lit the match, there was a huge explosion.
Okay.
The most reputable account of this accident was actually published in the Fort Collins Weekly Express on June 29th, 1911. So that was the only place that we could find it. This is also a story that has a lot of hearsay, but this was in the paper. And according to the article, the damage was about $10,000 worth. It blew up like 1/10. And room 217 is right above the dining room.
Okay.
The restaurant where we ate.
Oh, okay.
And so 3 people were injured in this accident, and it was the chambermaid. And the Fort Collins Weekly Express originally said it was Elizabeth Wilson, but they corrected it a couple weeks later, but a lot of people don't look at the corrections. Her name was actually Lizzie Leitenberger. So this ghost, I feel like,
I'm sorry,
is this name. So maybe
Burger
Leitenberger.
above a restaurant.
But I feel like, okay, maybe this ghost is pissed because we keep calling her Elizabeth Wilson, and that's not even her fucking name.
No.
So
why would they make such a Leitenberger?
Lizzie,
which is close to Elizabeth.
She may go by Lizzie.
Yeah. So I think that might be why there was some confusion.
Is there a difference between like maiden and married?
Yeah.
I don't know, but Leitenberger. That's
Anyways.
She lit up and she was over a burger joint. I don't know if they sell
she
burgers.
fell through the floor into the dining room, and she actually fell onto two waiters that were in the dining room also had the room collapse.
But she was already dead?
She's not dead.
Oh my God.
She miraculously survived.
Oh my gosh.
I did read in different accounts. Some accounts said she went into a coma, others didn't. But what we do know for sure is that she broke both of her ankles when she fell through. Oh, no. So it was very painful
my God.
for this poor lady, whether she was in a coma or not. Two ankles broken.
How did the floor break so easily?
It just blew up. It was like,
it blew up.
when you light a candle.
Okay.
Yeah, it just...
That's why I was like, is she dead? Like it had to have like burned for a while.
Yeah. And the waiters were okay. Like they just had some debris fall on them.
Their eyebrows were gone.
Maybe. But this poor Lizzie Elizabeth, whatever her correct name is, she broke both ankles. She did not die, but it is said that they think she still haunts the room.
Well, because they say that your energy can stay.
Yeah, the traumatic.
Yeah.
She was just going and doing her job.
Energy, just like repeated over and over and over again.
So stories from room 217. They've shared stories of waking up to a room that was tidier. This sounds like the best ghost ever, I have to say. I kind of wanted to move in with me.
My room. Yeah.
They wake up to their room.
Not just a room, okay? Entire
get
house.
to it, Lizzie. Will you clean my cat litter?
Exactly. Yes, I fucking hate cleaning cat litter.
Anyway,
I love my cats.
They've woken up to their room being tidier. Like, who complains about this? Who goes down to the room and goes down to the check-in desk and they're like, I woke up and my room was so clean. What's going on? They've woken up with their clothes folded and their suitcases reorganized.
They're like, those were dirty. How am I going to know the difference now?
I had them specifically. This story is kind of interesting. One couple told staff that their bed was made around them during the night while they were still sleeping. That would be kind of annoying. You're like, I'm sleeping. Get it off me. And she's like, covering her face up. By the way, rumor is she's quite old-fashioned. Mm-hmm. She believes you should be married to be sleeping in the same bed.
Oh, she's like, I'll just mummify you. Bad you.
So it's said that when unmarried people are like sleeping in the bed together, they've reported a chilly settling into the bed between them.
Oh,
so she's like
not happening.
She's a cock blocker is what I'm hearing.
That's awesome.
She's like, you're not getting any tonight until you get married.
Wait, you said 217 specifically.
217. Okay. You got to book it out 20 years from now or something.
I'm going to forget in 4 years.
So other guests have reported their shoes were lined up neatly on the end of the bed.
Thank you.
Once again, it doesn't sound too bad. The other thing that people have noticed, so this room used to be a larger suite until it was remodeled in the mid 2000s. So it was like one big, large suite. And so people have reported seeing shadow figures passing through the walls. Like perhaps there's a ghost in there that's like just moving in what used to be the larger suite.
So then don't get 217, get 216 or 15 or 14
you can
or
see
13
them coming
and then
out.
You're going to have experiences too. There you go.
Exactly.
Cheap hack.
So one of the biggest myths about this room is that it's not available and people can't stay there, but you can. It just takes a long time because it is the most popular room. Yeah. So you can book it, but God knows when you'll actually get to stay.
I've gone on the Stanley website so many times to see if they ever get cheaper.
You're always going to pay premium. I'm sure this one's 5 times as much.
They don't. The cheapest is like $370, and that's every room that I've looked at. So
the whole reason I'm doing this podcast is to try and get into room 217.
You shall let us in.
We're going to manifest it.
It is happening.
Get woo.
On October 31st. No, wait.
So I have one last little story about this room. So there was another famous movie filmed at the Stanley Hotel.
Yes, I know, and it's very annoying.
Dumb and Dumber.
I love the movie. Okay, so now I'm going to tell you a little
Yeah.
A haunting little thing I had. I'm going back to it. The bathroom.
Okay.
So like I had to go to the bathroom. I left the restaurant and the bathroom's like down this little staircase, right? To like, that's where the bathrooms are. And I go into the bathroom, I'm all by myself and the lights are flickering on and off. And I'm like,
okay.
That always happens to me though.
Yeah.
And then
it's an old hotel. You're and then whatever.
Things are always, my lights flicker in my house all the time. And I am a very spiritual, like very
You're
open.
to
I
it.
have a lot of stuff, but at the same time, I'm very aware that electricity. So I'm just like, whatever.
Right.
Anyway, one of my biggest annoyances about the Stanley is they have freaking posters of Dumb and Dumber everywhere.
Yes.
And I'm like, I want the experience of the Stanley. And I'm walking out of a bathroom stall to look at Jim Carrey
and Jeff Daniels looking really dumb, like
and
with
I'm
their
like,
little
this just
haircuts.
does not fit the ambiance. I'm sorry. A quick little
Yeah.
thing is I went into the bathroom with an earring. I came out and we were getting ready to leave. And I was putting my jacket on and my earring was gone. It's just gone. So I have an earring left at the Stanley somewhere.
That's crazy. And you wouldn't have done anything in the bathroom to knock an earring out. And you would have noticed.
It was going dark, like the lights would turn off and they would come back on and then it would flicker and turn off and turn back on. And one of my earrings is there. Maybe someone in the bathroom was like, I like that.
The woman at the top of the staircase
I'm
took your
keeping
earring.
it. I have an earring there.
That's crazy.
I wonder if
you had an experience at the Stanley then.
It's just I have a piece of me there. And what's really crazy is it's an earring that I've had since I was like 17.
So it's special.
It kind of was. And I'm like, it's not like it was like fancy or anything, but it's
special.
It's green and it's like this color that I always liked. And
so if anyone finds it at the Stanley,
dang it.
If you see a ghost wearing a green earring. While they were filming the Dumb and Dumber movie, it was in 1993, the crew mentioned just crazy things going on, similar to actually what your story was. They would swear they had put something somewhere and then they'd turn around and it would be gone. They would have things knocked over. So there was some kind of paranormal stuff going on. Jim Carrey himself requested room 217. And because he's a celebrity, of course, I'm sure they just knocked whoever was in there and put him in there. He wanted to go there to stay where Stephen King was inspired. He stayed there for 3 hours.
That's it?
He came down from room 217 to the front desk and was just like, I need a new room. He looked like he had seen a ghost, I guess.
Yeah.
He was white. They said he was very disheveled and scared looking, basically. And so they gave him another room. But unlike most people who experience paranormal activity, a lot of times you want to share that experience. Jim Carrey has yet to talk about what he experienced. He doesn't want to talk about it. It's been brought up in interviews. He will not talk about it. So none of us know what happened.
She probably mummified him and he couldn't get out for a minute.
That probably. She made that bed up around him tight.
He's such a jokester that no one would believe him. So he's like, I'm keeping this to myself.
Yeah, I don't think he wants to be seen as crazy. Yeah. A lot of people, unfortunately, are seen that way. But I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. And now he's kind of there for life because they leave his poster up in random places.
Yeah, and they have things in the gift store for his movie, too.
I mean, I love the movie, but it's like, I came here for the Stanley. I didn't come here to see
Dumb and Dumber.
Dumb and Dumber in the girls' bathroom.
So if you watch Dumb and Dumber, there is an image of the Stanley Hotel when they're pulling up, when they're chasing down the woman that he's in love with, played by Lauren Holly. I can't remember her name in the movie. And then also when they walk into the bar in their goofy outfits. That's part of the Stanley Hotel.
Okay.
So now let's move on to what is considered the most active part of the Stanley Hotel, and that's the 4th floor.
Ooh, neither of us, right?
I have not been on the 4th floor.
Neither of us got to do it. Okay.
I did a night tour, and so none of the tours will take you to
like
the rooms.
said.
You have to book them because they don't want to, and I appreciate that. If I'm staying there and paying $300 a night, I don't want to hear people traipsing about.
All by myself. I don't need you viewing this.
Exactly.
Thank you.
So the 4th floor, when the hotel was originally built, the 4th floor was an attic area, and it was actually where the female employees would stay with their children. So it was like an attic area with little rooms. Like it was not built out, I guess, for the posh East Coasters. It was built for the people working there. We can still just call it
a 4th room instead of the attic.
Yeah.
I mean, a 4th floor instead of the attic.
It was a 4th floor, but it was not a guest hotel
Just
area.
the workers. Okay.
So there's a lot of activity in the 4th floor. It was built out when they added, because if you remember right, the original hotel only had 48 rooms. There's now 140 rooms.
Holy moly.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
So they did that by adding to the 4th floor. Now let's talk about my favorite person, Lord Asshole. Let's talk about room 401.
Lord Asshat. Okay.
Some people say this is the creepiest room in the hotel because it is haunted by the unfriendly male ghost. This is the only ghost known in the hotel to be unfriendly to people.
Mm-hmm.
So people assume this ghost is Lord Dunraven because he owned the land prior to Freelan and he was a known asshole and maybe he's being taunted in his afterlife.
I mean, it's
and brought
possible.
back to the place where he, screwed people over.
He's vengeful. It was going to be named after him, but everybody signed
that's
a waiver
true.
to say, hell nah.
So now he's like, I'm going to live here forever.
Exactly.
Women have claimed that they were touched by an unknown presence while standing in the room's closet. So he seems to like hang out in the closet like a real creeper, and he inappropriately touches women.
Ugh.
And by that, they mean like their hair will be kind of played with. They've reported having an arm wrap around their waist.
Oh.
Or their shoulder, like, when a man or a woman comes up and hugs you from behind, that kind of feeling on their shoulders. Some women have reported having a hand moving up the back of their leg. So he's a creeper.
Yuck.
And he likes to touch women. Men don't feel particularly welcome in this room because he likes women, I guess. They have sometimes felt like when they're laying in bed, someone is pressing them into the bed and not letting them get up.
The men.
The men.
Yeah.
Not the women. The women he's too busy like flirting with and groping. Yeah. Several men have reported their jewelry disappearing, specifically their wedding rings. So one man claims he witnessed his wedding ring inexplicably moving across the bathroom counter and into the sink. On another occasion, witnesses reported there's a light in the corner that kept turning on and off. While the light was off, they told the ghost that they knew he was there and they would only be there for 2 nights and would he please just turn the light back on? And it came back on.
He's like, fine.
However, when they went to bed, he decided to play with the light again because he's a dick and he kept turning the light off and on.
It's like, this is the only thing I can do. So
they also reported on the same night that they constantly heard noise from the nearby elevator during a time when the elevator was actually broken down and not in use.
The elevator is a ghost.
Maybe. This is the room that people have reported seeing a ghostly face in from the outside. So if you're outside the hotel looking up at room 401, it has been reported to see a face looking out the window. This has happened when the room was not booked.
Oh, okay.
For any of you guys that are fans, and I used to watch this myself, the sci-fi show Ghost Hunters.
Yeah.
They actually stayed at the Stanley Hotel and did a paranormal investigation. This was the room that Jason stayed in, and he had a drinking glass. I remember this vividly because I was obsessed with the Stanley Hotel. He had a drinking glass that was sitting on the nightstand, and it imploded while he was sleeping. And they caught it on camera.
Oh,
it was crazy. And then the closet door also opened and closed on its own while they were doing that investigation. Room 401. So let's move on to another room on the 4th floor.
Okay.
There's a few. I actually have 3 more rooms on the 4th floor that are haunted. So room 407, this is another room that people like to tuck you into bed, apparently. Multiple guests have reported the odd experience of being tucked into bed.
Maybe they used to do that back in the day.
Could be.
It could have been like a service.
Kind of like a turn down service. This is a turn up service.
I'm going to come tuck your little sides and your toesies
I wouldn't mind being
bed.
tucked in, especially when it's cold back then. Others have felt someone sit on the foot of the bed. So there was one woman who stayed in this room and she said she felt someone sit on the bed. She got up because it freaked her out, turned on the lights. Nobody was there, but there was an indentation on the bed, like where somebody's butt had just been.
Okay.
So that's crazy. There was a mom that stayed there with her little boy, and he said that he kept kicking his covers off in the middle of the night, but she kept putting them back on. And he was really annoyed when he woke up. He was like, Mom, I was hot. I kept trying to push the covers off and you put them back up. And she was like, I wasn't awake. I didn't put the covers over you. So somebody else was covering.
Somebody else.
Yeah.
Or she was sleepwalking.
Lucid dreaming. So that's room 407. Those are, if you want to experience those things, visit room 407. Room 418. So this one actually is the room that receives the most reports to the staff of activity. And apparently this is the room where people hear children's spirits the most. And cleaning crews have reported hurting.
Cleaning crews have reported hurting.
I've had a little bit of wine by now. Sorry, guys.
She hasn't had much.
Words are hard.
We're blaming it on other things and it's not true.
It's a lot of talking.
I know.
It's a lot of talking. I get tongue-tied. What is happening?
Tongue-tied.
Okay, so cleaning crews have reported hearing strange noises from the room, as well as seeing impressions on the bed when the room has been empty. So they come in to make the bed or clean it, and it looks like a bunch of kids have been sitting on the bed. So when guests stay in the room, they often report they hear children playing in the hallway at night. One couple reportedly checked out of the hotel very early in the morning, complaining that the children in the hallway kept them up all night. However, the staff said there were no children booked in the hotel. Covers, once again, this seems to be a thing at the Stanley. Covers are sometimes removed during the night. So in this room, they take them off you. In the other rooms, they put them on you.
Not for you tonight. No turn down service. Screw you.
You are going to be cold. It makes sense. It's little mischievous children. They're like, I'm going to rip the covers off you.
My mom tucks you in and I take you out.
Yep. And then hangers in the closet are known to move on their own. So maybe kids run around in the closet is what I think of.
Or they're like my daughter.
Bathroom lights have also been reported to turn on and off on their own.
I feel like I have to give context to that.
Yeah, go.
I came to Kendra's bathroom lights turning off.
I see where
own.
you're going. The closet child.
Yes. So like we came to Kendra's house and there was like no furniture in here, and I had my daughter with me, and she ran upstairs, and as any kid, I think adults too, it's just fun to be in an empty house. Yeah. Okay.
I agree.
And she went up there and we found her in a closet of one of the rooms. And she's like, this is my room now and we're moving in here.
And she didn't want to leave.
She didn't want to leave.
I think you had to bribe her with something to get her to leave. Yeah. Like she would have stayed in that closet for hours and hours.
And I remember doing stuff like that when I was a kid. I'm like, this is my special place.
Maybe that's what your daughter will do one day when she's a ghost.
She's going to play with hangers in the closet. Yeah.
Okay, so speaking of kids, a little girl staying in room 418, she told her mom the morning after, she was like, some little boy kept tickling me during the night. She's like, he kept waking me up and tickling me. And her mom was like, were you afraid? And she's like, no, I told him to stop and he did.
I mean, if my daughter said that to me, obviously the mom had to have been prepared for ghostly encounters at the Stanley. Because if my daughter came to me and was like, oh, this little boy was tickling me while I was sleeping, my response would not have been, well, did it scare you?
Well, let's move on to the next room. So this is the last room on the 4th floor that you can stay in that is reportedly haunted. It's room 428. Okay, let's see if you like what the ghosts do. So this is like a pick your own adventure hotel. So. You get to choose which room you want to go to. They did say it was Disneyland for ghosts. So room 428, guests have reported hearing footsteps above them and furniture moving. That sounds kind of annoying. If you've ever lived in a first floor apartment, that's what I picture. But here's the thing is people are hearing footsteps and furniture moving, but it's actually physically impossible for anyone to be above them. There's no rooms above there. And the slope of the roof wouldn't allow anyone to be walking or anything up there either. So that's kind of odd.
Maybe the children were playing on the roof.
However, maybe, possibly, the real haunt in this room that everyone brings up is a friendly cowboy. They don't know who this guy is. A couple awoke to find a Wild West cowboy pacing at the end of their bed. After watching him for a few minutes, they asked him to leave politely, and he did. So he's like, okay, sorry, miss, I'll go.
Sorry, miss.
Sorry, little lady. But why are all the male ghosts got to be creepy? Here we go. He would not leave, but first he had to lean over and kiss the lady on the forehead. Female guests have reported waking up to find Mr. Cowboy leaning over their bed as if he's about to kiss them. So he's a kisser.
That's kind of sad, though. That kind of makes me think of it's like a residual memory, and that this cowboy was staying there and he was saying goodbye to his partner or whatever while she's still sleeping. He kisses her on the forehead and he leaves for the day. He goes and dies.
Oh my God, you're probably right. This was a dude ranch, and this was, it could have been someone who never stayed at the hotel. That's what I thought of.
Like, he doesn't know who it is. It's just someone in the bed.
And he's stuck in that.
He's stuck in the loop of leaving her and kissing. Maybe he wanted to say something instead of just kiss her, and then he dies. And so he felt like he didn't do enough.
So it's a loving cowboy. That's the 4th floor. So this next place I'm going to talk about, you can only go here if you are an employee or you go on the nightly ghost tour at the Stanley Hotel.
Is it that locked door that's like by the bathrooms downstairs?
It is.
Okay. Oh, I didn't get to
And it leads to a pretty dark, eerie kind of place. And it's the underground caves.
Okay.
The caves here have a high concentration of limestone and quartz, which is why some paranormal investigators, ghost hunters, believe that the Stanley may have captured so much ghostly encounters is because that is known to hold energy. So it makes sense when you're down there that you feel this energy, because I did. And it's very cold. So why would a hotel need a network of caves underneath? You may ask that question. I did. The reason is in the early days of the Stanley, remember they're catering to the swanky. It was seen as unprofessional for the staff to actually be seen by the guests.
How dare they?
Yeah. So they had this network of caves where they would use the underground pathways to travel between rooms. That's where they would travel between the hotel bar and if they were bringing room service, or the restaurant and the laundry facility. So if they were taking sheets and everything, they would use these underground tunnels. What ghost is down here? This is maybe my favorite ghost in the Stanley. They believe it's the ghost of a pastry chef from the original days. They think he haunts the caves because there's an alluring and just an uncanny scent of baked goods down there. I did not smell that when I was down there. I wish I did. It probably would have made me hungry. I don't know. I really, really like donuts and croissants and all of that.
I'll just spray like Bath and Body Works down there every now and then. And they're like, damn it, they didn't smell it that time.
Like I said, I felt some kind of presence down there. Yeah. I remember when I did the tour, they mentioned another ghost down there, and I feel like it had something to do with like wine being stored down there, but I could not find that story anywhere, and I looked. So when you go on the tour, there is another story, but I cannot remember it for the life of me. So let's go to my favorite kind of ghosts, the pet cemetery.
Okay.
Because I love animals. I can't help it.
So do I.
Animals are just the sweetest. I think I like them more than people. Well, so the pet cemetery on the property was where the owners of the hotel and the caretakers would bury their beloved pets over the years. And guests have reported seeing ghosts of some of these animals wandering the property. So among them is a golden retriever named Cassie.
Oh, she has to be a good one.
And Cassie is said to still deliver newspapers. They talk about this on the ghost tour as well. And people have heard her specifically in the lodge, because if you stay in the lodge, there's like outside doors. People have reported to hear scratching at the doors, like a dog wanting to let them in. And they open the door and there's no dog anywhere around. So they think that's Cassie. And then there's a white cat named Comanche that has also been seen. And you can see these little tombstones if you go to the pet cemetery. There wasn't a lot written about what Comanche does. I think she's a cat. So she's just wandering around and people see her and they're like, oh, there was a beautiful white cat. And they're like, yeah, we don't have a cat on property. That's Comanche. So yeah, you can visit the pet cemetery. I actually went there when I visited in the middle of the day. I guess I've been to the Stanley 3 times because I went for the ghost tour. Then you and I went. And then I also went there to visit Rocky Mountain National Park one day. We stopped in the middle of the day specifically because I wanted to see the pet cemetery, because honestly, it feels a little creepy to go out there at night. It's quite a ways away from the hotel.
That's
you have to walk down
when
a path.
you're supposed to go though.
I know. So
is that where pet cemetery comes from?
So interestingly that you said that. Funnily enough, the cemetery and ghost stories predate Stephen King's novel Pet Sematary. So this was not an inspiration for him.
Oh.
But maybe he saw it there.
Yeah.
But he's never come out and said that. But yes, in the book by Stephen King, Pet Sematary, the animals come back to life. But I don't think they're as kind as Cassie and Comanche.
No.
So, I mean, to me, these are the ghosts I want to meet. Like, I want Cassie to show up and bring me my newspaper.
Yeah.
So that's all the ghosts that are out there, or the stories. I did want to share. So I was looking for like more experiences from people who have gone to the Stanley as guests. And there were some newspapers around the Fort Collins area, which isn't too far from Estes Park, and Denver. And people asked for stories for people who had been to the Stanley Hotel. And so I just wanted to tell a few of those because I thought they were interesting. Cool. And Jessica, you had your experience with your earring. I have not had one personally, so I need to visit the Stanley a few more times. So I'm going to read a couple of stories. This lady was from Fort Collins, and she said there were definitely children in our room. Also, an older man with a mustache, I wonder which guy that was lurking in the corner of my room in the middle of the night. I'm thinking, Dunraven. She didn't say what room she stayed in.
Okay.
Another woman, she came from out of town, and she said she stayed at the Stanley for an educators conference, and she kept hearing something like a remote control car in the room next door, and she said it happened all night. I'm trying to think of what that noise sounds like. Anyway, she went to the front desk in the morning and she was like, it was really loud. It kept me up at night. And the front desk said, that room's empty. Nobody was there last night. So,
I mean, it could have just been a wind up, whatever.
Yeah. Like something from back in the days, like a little
I'm toy guessing for a little boy,
a child playing. Another one was, she said, we were walking around the hotel and my daughter had a fairly big strand of hair just go completely horizontal. She said her hair was wet, so it couldn't have just been like a static electricity thing.
I was about to say that. I'm like, that happens.
Like, she said a big strand, so I don't know.
A chunk.
I'm thinking a chunk of hair just went up, so that's kind of weird, right?
Yeah, that is weird. Okay.
Dunraven loves playing with women's hair. Could have been him.
It could have been him.
Someone else said their can of hairspray kept moving off the bathroom sink.
They're like, that's toxic. Stop it.
What would they be doing with that?
Don't know. Starting a fire.
Ghosts don't need to spray their hair.
for Lightenberger.
Okay, so a family on a hotel tour snapped a picture on the stairs. And this is another one that I'm going to add to the Instagram because I think it's really interesting. So this was a day tour where they were able to go up the grand staircase, and they said there were no little girls on the tour, but in the picture there is a little girl and she's wearing a little white dress in the picture. So I'll add that to Instagram and you can decide for yourself.
Okay.
Another one that has picture proof at this moment is a visitor was outside and they looked up to the 4th floor and they could see a woman, and it looked like just a woman hanging out and looking out the curtains. They took a picture because this woman looked, once again, kind of old-timey, and they showed it to the hotel workers, and they couldn't explain it because that was actually a time when that part of the hotel had been closed off to do reconstruction on the rooms.
It doesn't say what floor.
I believe it was the 4th floor. I do have these pictures. We'll add them to the Instagram. You can decide for yourself. These are well published out there. So I have the picture of the woman at the top of the stairs that I mentioned earlier, and then these two. And then I have Lucy from the basement. So 4 of them. So to wrap this episode up, I just wanted to say, the Stanley Hotel, it is listed right now on the National Register of Historic Places today. It does, like I said, have 140 rooms. So you are able to stay there. If you don't want to stay in the main building, they have built some, more modern apartment style residences that you can stay in. And there's actually expansive condominiums they've added where if you want to stay for, months at a time, you can.
Yep.
Yeah. If you can't afford a night at the Stanley, they do have lots of restaurants. They have a bar. You can go in the hotel at any time. You are not able to go everywhere, but you can go in the main lobby. You can see the grand staircase. You can
go
on the outside. You can go to the pet cemetery. You can go to the hedge maze. You can go to the gardens. And you can take a tour. They have daytime historic tours, and then they have the night tour, like I mentioned in the ghost tour. And they just started a new tour. It's a Shining themed tour. And that one, they actually took one of the cottages and set it up as a scene, I think, from the original movie. So
now
that was just added. I know. I wasn't able to do that one last time.
Yeah.
Another little tidbit is there is a channel in the Stanley Hotel on all the TVs that plays The Shining.
I heard about this.
Nonstop. So when you stay there, you can watch The Shining.
It's not just the movie. They also play the TV series.
Do
it's
they?
Back.
Okay.
Yeah. It's alternated.
None of those tours, like I said before, will allow you into the guest room, so you will need to book. If you go on their website to book, they have a whole separate section called Spirited Rooms, and that's where you can choose to stay in one of those rooms that I mentioned before on the 4th floor or room 217. There is a television screen outside of the tour office that features ghosts that have been caught on camera by tour guests, and that's really fun to look at. I checked that out when I was there last time. Also, the concert hall now serves as a venue for many bands go there, comedians go there. They actually have a seance there now.
Hold our very first live show there.
I love that idea.
Whenever it happens in life.
In 10 years. Hopefully sooner. October is a great time if you want to go to the Stanley and you want to have some creepy stuff. They call it the Twin Terror Weekends. They actually have a murder mystery dinner you can attend.
Oh, I don't want to do that. Yeah.
They have something called the Shining Ball, which I really want to go to.
Yeah, we're going to have to do that.
You have to dress up to go. And then they also have the Halloween masquerade party.
See, and they also do a New Year's masquerade.
They do so many fun events up there.
But that's so cool. And it sells out fast.
I will say their website is www.stanleyhotel.com. And that's where you would go to either book a tour. I think the tour is around like $25 to $40, depending on what you choose. I highly recommend the ghost tour because it's fun at night.
Yeah.
During the day, you can go up the staircase, but they don't let you into the guest rooms.
No,
ever,
of course not. Just like knock and be like, I know you're in 217 and you've waited 5 years for this, but let me in.
And they're like, I paid $1,500.
No.
Get out. So yeah, that's the Stanley Hotel.
I loved it.
I hope you guys enjoyed it. I just wanted to share the legacy of Freelan Stanley and get to know him, and then all the fun ghosty stuff. I did a lot of research here. I hope I brought you, the most accurate information. I'll put sources, all of that in the show notes. And thank you for listening. We would love to hear any stories from those of you who might have been to the Stanley. We'd love to hear it.
Yes. If you have any lab reports, email that to lucidlabpodcast@gmail.com.
And check us out on social media. We're on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and Facebook, all at Lucid Lab Podcast, one word.
and go and rate us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts if you can.
And share something with a friend.
Yes, definitely.
Stay
lucid.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.